A lot of people say like, oh, I'm so sorry, like, about your diagnosis. I'm sorry that you have to go through that. And I always tell people, like, I'm not, though. Because had I not been diagnosed, had I not been exposed to the people that I have been or had the mindset that I have, I wouldn't be the person I am today. And the person that I am today, I'm extremely proud of, because if I died tomorrow, I know that I made an impact in enough people's lives. I spoke life into enough people's lives that I feel like I did what my duty was on earth, you know?
Welcome to the Art to Heart podcast. My name is David Moore, and I'm a former corporate sales guy turned poet. And this is where we explore how finding your voice can help your path and your purpose find you. Whether you're currently in a career transition or can't wait to be in one, we learn how leaning into creative expression can be the missing key to transforming your life and the life around you. What's up, y'all? Thanks for tuning in today. I am editing and releasing this podcast from Lago Atitlan, Guatemala. I'll be out here for a few weeks, and I didn't bring any gear out here with me or recording equipment. Just wanted to apologize for any background noise for the intro and the outro, but otherwise the rest of the quality will be good. Thanks so much for tuning in. Imagine you're a 12-year-old living your best life. You're in cheerleading, you're super social, and you love making friends, but suddenly something feels off. You begin feeling weaker, and you literally lose the ability to smile. You can't open your eyes. You have trouble chewing, swallowing, and out of nowhere, you helplessly fall to the floor when you're walking. You know for a fact that something is wrong with you, so your mom takes you to see a doctor. But all they say is that you're acting out for attention. Your parents are Hispanic and from a rural community, so of course, they completely trust the doctor and don't believe that something is going seriously wrong with you. Meet Elisa Ramos, who's now 29 years old and lives with a form of muscular dystrophy called Myasthenia Gravis, or MG. It is a chronic autoimmune neuromuscular disease that causes weakness in the skeletal muscles that worsens after periods of activity and improves after periods of rest. In addition, her MG invited two other autoimmune disorders to her life, lupus and sjorgens, that she now lives with as well. To put it simply, Elisa describes it as her body actively trying to kill her. In this episode, Elisa talks about her journey of being diagnosed with MG at a young age and how finding her voice through writing and painting has helped her to not only empower herself, but to advocate for others. We also talk about how spoken word poetry has helped her heal after being sexually assaulted and get a behind-the-scenes look at the daily struggles of living with a disability in corporate America. Sadly, the service I used to record this episode had a technical error, and the last 10 minutes of the interview from Elisa's end was unforgivably lost. It ends rather abruptly, and I considered not releasing it, but we talk about too many things that too many people need to hear. I hope you enjoy the episode, and let's dive in. I have known Elisa for over a decade now. I think I first met you in 2009, 2010 at that first camp.
That sounds absolutely about right.
We met at you were a camper at a summer camp for Muscular Dystrophy Association. And then I think I met you your last year as a camper, and then you came back the next year as a volunteer. And then that's kind of when, we had our big MDA family out there. But Elisa is someone who's very creative and very talented. She has taken up cooking, photography, acrylic nails, crafting. She's always up to something, and she's just someone really great to talk to. Yeah, Lisa, I don't want to keep talking about you. What's up?
Well, thank you. Yeah, so I definitely have known David for 10 years, and you're absolutely right. You met me in my last year of MDA camp because I actually was diagnosed at 12, and the camp director, who is also a very good friend of ours, she basically begged me my whole youth to go to MDA camp, and I refused. And then finally it was like I was 17 and she was just like, this is literally your last chance. We even extended the date so that way you can go before you turn 18. And so I was just like, you know what, screw it. And I did. And that's how I met like everyone that I call my family. And it definitely changed like the whole trajectory of my life, I would say.
Wow, I think I might have heard that before, but I didn't know that you were so adamant about not going. Why did you not want to go for so long? Like what age, what were you diagnosed with and how old were you? And then how long until you went to camp?
Yeah, I was 12 when I got my initial diagnosis. And so, yeah, for what is it? 4 years? 5 years, the camp director, Carrie at the time,
y'all will hear from
basically,
Carrie. She's
yeah,
gonna be on here.
yeah, amazing person. Also the reason why I am who I am today. Yeah, she like begged me for like 5 years every time I would go to my appointments because I was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis, which is one of the many types of muscular dystrophy. There's over 40 different types. I was very blessed enough to get diagnosed with one that allows me to be a little bit more able, and that doesn't necessarily affect my organs or my body the way others do, unfortunately. But I, at the time, was, in a very bad state, not only like physically, mentally. So yeah, for those 5 years, she just kept trying to convince me. I was super embarrassed at the time to go because I had went from like being super skinny, and then I gained probably like 150 pounds in like a year after being diagnosed because I was on so much prednisone. And so for a lot of that was like, so a lot of it was like humility. Like I wasn't ready to, I don't know, do that. And then I also, I just didn't know how it was going to be. Like, I was just like, oh, camp, I don't want someone to go over there and baby me. I've always been super hyper independent. But yeah, I don't know what it was. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to give it a chance. She extended the date. I'm just going to go. Like, my mom wasn't super strict. She was obviously concerned because, like, I do have medical problems. But I was just like, hey, there's professionals there. Like, other people are doing it. I'll be good.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I went my first year. And everyone thought that I was a counselor, actually. Everyone legitimately thought I was a counselor, and I don't think that it was until like the last day where they do like awards and stuff that everyone realized like, oh crap, she's been a camper this whole time.
Actually, that's so true. That's right. I do remember, like, what, you were a camper? You sneaky devil.
Yeah, they were like, she's a spy. But yeah, it was my first year. And I just remember like even midweek, I told Carrie, like, this is great. I loved coming here as a camper, but I definitely feel like I resonate more with being a counselor because I did realize I was much more able than the other kids that were there. And not that deserves to like, I should get like a check go and be a counselor just because of that. But I was just like, no, like, this is something that I want to continue to do. I messed up. I should have came all my other years. And so that was my way of kind of like getting my way in. And yeah, she allowed me to come back like the next years. I think I did it for, I don't know.
Yeah, because I think we went for like 3 or 4 consecutive summers for a while.
Yeah. And so that's how I met you, and I met all my MDA family. Yeah.
It's been such a long time. And so if anyone is not familiar, so Elisa mentioned that there are over 40 different types of muscular dystrophy. And so there's it varies from severity with so many of the children and youth. And a lot of them will need a lot of hands-on, they can't really eat or go to the bathroom without assistance. And so that's why we do need a volunteer with them that whole time, just because you never know what would happen. So how old were you? You said you were 12?
I was 12 when I got diagnosed. However, I was 11 when I started getting symptoms.
So this is myasthenia gravis.
So that's a touchy subject. Yeah.
Usually all labels are, right?
You're right. Yeah. Myasthenia gravis is, what I started getting symptoms of. I had no idea what it was at that moment. I knew that there was something wrong with me. So the way everything happened, I'll just kind of, I guess, like give you snippets or start from the beginning is I was 11 and I had really bad, like swollen tonsils. And so then I had to go get those out, and they usually put you to sleep. And apparently anesthetics are really bad for patients that have neurological disorders. I didn't know that I had one.
Is it just because it?
Yeah. I think, I'm assuming anesthetics are neurological, like it messes with whatever. But I know that specifically I was told, after my diagnosis, that because it messes like with your respiratory function, it's often likely that neurological patients either take longer to get to awaken, or it could cause you to just kind of like stay in that state of almost like a coma.
High risk.
Absolutely high risk.
So did you know about the risk, or did your parents kind of keep that from you, or?
I knew about the risk once I was, but obviously when I was getting that, I was quote unquote normal. I was in cheerleading. I didn't have any symptoms, but literally probably 2 weeks after is when my whole world just got flipped upside down. I started getting my symptoms where I wasn't able to smile. It literally, I couldn't open my eyes anymore. I was having trouble chewing, swallowing. I couldn't drink out of a straw. I would fall constantly. Taking stairs was a nightmare. Yeah, it was super, super, super intense.
I remember you were telling me about that when we were chatting yesterday. And I think what just stood out the most to me is how you said it was kind of like you were just so alone in that, even at that young of an age. So if I remember correctly, you said that it was because you kept falling, and the first doctor you went to said, and this is part of the broader issue, but the doctor didn't believe you. And he said, oh, it's just it's a behavioral thing. And then so being that your mom was a Hispanic woman and you were as young as you were, I think we're kind of trained to just listen to the doctors. They know what they're talking about. And so that's what happened with your mom. She took the doctor's word for it. And
yeah. So for 8 months, so after I started getting all of my symptoms, they didn't all come out once. It slowly progressively got worse. But, when they did start, I obviously told my mom, hey, something's going on. We need to go to the doctor. And when we did go to the doctor, again, being from a very, very small rural town, they're not even a city. The doctor basically was like, she's doing it for attention. Because at the time, my mom was taking care of one of my newest, youngest nieces, my sister's daughter. And so, the doctor was just like, these are not normal things. She's definitely doing it for attention. And so for the 6 to 8 months that it took to get diagnosed, I was being taken to therapist appointments. And so it was just, always super grumpy and yelling at them and telling them I know that I'm not crazy. I know what I'm going through. And it was just a lot of advocating, not only to my doctors, but even trying to convince, I think my parents at the time that even though, yes, I'm not a doctor and the doctor is telling you, and you should take this person that has this highest degree to tell you everything for face value. I was just I know there's something wrong with me, Mom. And it really wasn't until bigger instances started happening, because nobody likes being embarrassed. Nobody likes calling attention to themselves, especially at a young age. I started falling more often at school. I started falling during PE. I couldn't even finish my lap.
You would just, would you be able to know before it happens, or it just kind of happens?
I mean, now as an adult, I can definitely identify triggers. But as a kid then, it was just you felt tired. And so I don't know, as a kid, you just keep going and you think that you're invincible. And so that's what I kept doing. And I continuously kept falling. I had to quit doing cheerleading and volleyball and all of this stuff. And so then my mom was like, okay, this is not adding up. This is not like her. She's an extrovert. She likes being involved. I was on student council. And I mean, then that's when she was like, okay, you know what? Let's go to the ER. But the fun fact about MG is that, with a little bit of rest and just like calming yourself down, your body kind of recuperates. It's almost like a battery when you have
symptoms act as a battery. So they'll flare up. The symptoms will flare up in the moment that you're like having the crisis.
Yeah.
And then by the time you get to the hospital, all the symptoms are gone. So they think, yeah, damn.
Exactly. So some of the symptoms are exacerbated by like overworking myself or like exercising. If I'm super, super stressed out, like emotional, like that will cause a crisis. And then heat. Heat is my enemy. Not only does it just cause like a physical flare up where like I'll fall or like not have any strength, but it starts to affect my respiratory muscles to the point where if it's too hot or I overwork myself in the heat or I'm just trying to enjoy myself, it's like my muscles slowly start to give out and it feels like I'm almost gasping for air. So my diaphragm becomes like not strong enough to even pull in the amount of air that we need.
So you're listing all of these symptoms and also of all these triggers that are happening now, but I couldn't help but imagine what that would have been like young growing up and like learning all of these new things that keep happening. I don't know, I'm just trying to get into your headspace of what that was like as a kid. Like
intense. I was always very intense, and like even like how I said, my mom took me to the ER and like by the time I was there, it subsided and she was just like, make it happen. Like, do the thing. And I'm like, it's not a thing. Like I can't do, like my body just reacts to whatever's around it. Like it's an environmental thing. I don't know. And so, yeah, I mean, like I left the ER with no answers. They were just like, okay, well, we'll look into it. She's not going to die. Blood work's good. You're good. You're good. And so, yeah, every time something like that would happen, every new doctor, every new person, I just felt completely invalidated. I felt defeated. But I mean, my other option was to just quit and just accept it. But I was not going to because I knew that my body was getting worse. And so I just kind of continued on with my life, but I still was like very adamant about like, I need to go to the doctor. There's something wrong. Like I feel something wrong, but I didn't necessarily get to the doctor, unfortunately, until like it was a public thing. So like I felt like everything was internal. Like my family knew what was going on. Yeah, I was missing school and I was, still trying to have a normal life, but that was still happening in the background. I was super excited one day to go to a field trip. It was to the San Francisco Exploratorium. And I was so excited, wow. But I also knew in my mind that I had issues with getting on upstairs because my mom had 3 steps, like our house had 3 steps to get into or stairs or whatever to get up into the house. Mm-hmm. And even though we had rails, my knees or legs would buckle every time I would go up and every time I would go down.
Consistently, like pretty much predictably, you knew this would happen.
Yeah, it was to the point where like my mom would literally, she would just like watch me because she knew it was going to happen. And so, the reason too, why I think doctors or like my family thought that it was like, again, fake was because your body turns into a rag doll. It almost looks fake. But it's just really like your body involuntarily just gives out, rage quits.
So what was it like when you finally did get the diagnosis?
I felt great, but it also sucked at the same time because I felt like, I'll say the bad first is because I had gone through 8 months of being invalidated, 8 months of, essentially being told I was crazy and at some point, like getting bullied about it at home, not only at home, but at school. And so I felt like I had lost a piece of myself already. But it was also great in the sense that it validated me. I felt heard. I now have this diagnosis. I understand what's going on with me. But again, at the end of it, it's still like I lost a piece of myself already and I already felt defeated. But now I also have to mourn the life that I thought I was going to have.
Hmm. So like, what does your life look like with myasthenia gravis? Because I ask that in the spirit of, you know, there's so much behind the scenes that so many people face that no one knows any idea. We just see them go to work and go home and we think we're chilling, you know, but
yeah.
And so, yeah, just to try to bring more awareness about the battles people are fighting.
I won't go over how, like, quote unquote, what my normal life would have been like, because again, I said I was like super active, involved, all of those things. I was in sports. So yeah, all of those things changed, but I still tried to stay true to myself. I'm still, I would say, like, very active and like out there. And I like you said, I shared, you know, I did volunteer and I did all of these things, but behind the scenes, it's super, super difficult in the sense that I have a million specialists. I have to constantly figure out how I'm going to make all of my doctor's appointments, but still be able to go to work. But also take into account that you don't accrue a lot of sick time or PTO. And if I'm having 2 specialist appointments a week, like, none of that's adding up. Unfortunately, good specialists aren't local. So I usually have to drive anywhere between an hour or 4 hours away. So that definitely affects my work life and also just personal life, because I mean, I even get treatments on the weekends.
Corporate machine. I heard someone refer to, the topic was about death and how the workplace has dehumanized us all so much that, like, when people, anyway, so like I'm equating us to like machines, like, you know, they kill out the humanity of us and expect us to be like a machine. Like we are no different than the conveyor belts, you know?
Yeah. And I would say, like, that's a good way of like segueing, like, work-life balance is really, really hard when you have any type of disability, not even just like factoring in appointments and my treatments but medications. Like, my medications make me feel like I'm dead every day. Like, I've been hit by a bus, but unfortunately,
every single day.
Yeah. I wake up every day, probably the first hour of my day, I am vomiting for at least a solid 30 minutes or just trying to gather myself, because that's how much my body hates me.
What gets you out of bed?
Oh, that's a good question. What gets me out of bed is I've always been an advocate, and I've promised myself since my diagnosis to be an advocate. And I've always told myself that, you know, I was going to utilize my bad experience, or not just my bad experience in getting diagnosed, but also utilize, like, I guess the cards that were dealt to me. So my diagnosis, all of the bad that's happened in my life, to just make a difference in other people's lives.
What was that moment like?
Speak life into other people.
A guide. Yeah, we did say that you are a guide for other people. I want to backtrack for a second. What was that moment like when you said you made that pact with yourself? Like, was that an immediate thing you did as soon as you got the diagnosis, or did you sit with it for a while and then you, like, I'm sure did you have like an internal battle of, fuck, I'm just going to like be in bed the rest of my life? Or you're like, fuck this, like, there's more out there for me?
Yeah, no, it was an internal battle. I would say, again, after my diagnosis, I went into a very, very deep depression. I decided I no longer wanted to go to school. So I signed myself up for home studies at 6th grade, and I just decided I was going to do school from home because life was too hard.
You grew the hell up. You did that yourself at 6th grade?
Yeah.
Holy shoot. Yeah.
And I thought that it would have been a seamless thing, but unfortunately, when you come from a small rural community, they're also understanding how to process things or how to do things. And so it was super difficult actually trying to get my homework from home. Mind you, I've always been in like GATE classes, like in like the smart classes, whatever, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
so
GATE is literally gifted and talented education or something.
Yeah,
my brother
I don't even know what it
stands
for.
My older brother and my little sister both got into it. I have another older brother. I don't think he got into it, but I think we're the black sheep. But it's like, what the hell? It just skipped me. Like,
yeah. I was in all of the gate classes. And so, yeah, they even try to like fight me and my mom and try to say like, oh, well, you know, we can't necessarily send that homework home. Like someone needs to be there, all of this stuff. So then I would have to like fight the district to like send me homework. And then it just finally got to the point where like I was creating my own homework. I was on independent studies at that point. And also keep in mind, my mom didn't finish past 8th grade. So it was literally me.
Were you the oldest? How many siblings did you have?
I'm the youngest.
Do you have? You're the youngest.
I have 5 siblings. I'm the youngest of 6.
And so were they just think you were going crazy? Like, why don't you want to go to school? Or were they all pretty supportive?
At the time when everything was happening, because my mom, like most of my siblings are a little bit older, I think they just kind of went through the motions too. Like they didn't really know what was going on. I was in the hospital all the time. So I think like no one really questioned it. They were just like, okay, well, that's what you want to do. Then sure, do it. Take it on, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I've kind of always made my own decisions, I guess, since like 6th grade. I definitely had to grow up a lot faster than I would say most kids did.
So it gave you a lot of agency.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how many years has it been since you're diagnosed? No, I guess you don't have to say your age. You don't.
I've been 17 years. I'm
Okay.
29 now. I'm super, super proud of who I am. And I will definitely give credit to the fact that I was diagnosed with MG. A lot of people say like, oh, I'm so sorry, like about your diagnosis. I'm sorry that you have to go through that. And I always tell people like, I'm not though, because had I not been diagnosed, had I not been exposed to the people that I have been or had the mindset that I have, I wouldn't be the person I am today. And the person that I am today, I'm extremely proud of, because if I died tomorrow, I know that I made an impact in enough people's lives. I spoke life into enough people's lives that I feel like I did what my duty was on earth, you know?
Do you think about that often? Death? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, because unfortunately, because MG is an autoimmune disorder, I also recruited 2 other autoimmune disorders. So I not only have I not only have MG, but I have lupus and sjorgens, and all 3 of those essentially are autoimmune disorders. And autoimmune disorders are your body attacking itself and attacking your organs. So I'm constantly, death is constantly at the back of my head, just because my body is literally trying to kill me. But I'm not scared of death, I guess I would say, just because, like I said, I feel that I've tried to be a positive light in other people's lives. And even though there's a lot of darkness in my life and there's a lot of things that I'm fighting in the background, I'm still very open, even like on my social media and all of that stuff about that. Yeah, I guess like life just doesn't scare me.
You said you're fighting the darkness. Like, what are your weapons to fight? You know, what do you lean on the most to get through and to wake up again and decide again that, you know, you want to advocate, and there's people out there that are waiting for your help.
Like I said, at a very young age, I've always been an advocate. So as soon as I feel like social media became a thing, I utilize that as my outlet to get the message across, to inform people what MG was, not only just to inform them, but like show them that, yes, even with a disability, you're so much more capable of other things. Like your disability shouldn't define you. Unfortunately, we live in a society where it's easier to put us people that are disabled in a box and just say, go on disability. Like, that's where it's at.
That's your life now. Just get out of our way.
Exactly. And I just kind of never took that for face value. And so.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I try to express myself in different ways, not just in social media. You can see art behind me.
How many of those did you paint?
I would say about 80% of them are my paintings. And then the others are either something that I drew up that I allowed my niece or nephew to paint, because I've slowly tried to introduce in my head, it's art therapy. They don't realize that that's what I'm seeing it as, but just teaching them how to express themselves and not put themselves in a box, because I used to tell myself like, oh, you can't paint, or, oh, you can't do this. And it wasn't until I finally let go of like, no, I can. I decide that. I decide my reality. And I just gave myself permission to be creative. I was able to like hone into all of these skills and stuff that I didn't even realize I had.
What first inspired you to paint? And what was that first experience like? You know, what about it made you want to pick up the brush a second time?
I will say the first time I ever like painted seriously, I don't know if you can see it. There's a skull right there, right?
The sugar skull in the middle?
Yeah.
You painted that?
Yeah. I went to one of those like wine and paint sip nights, right? With one of my friends.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I was awing. I was gawking at the painting. Start over about the painting, please.
Yeah, no, you're good. So I went into like a wine and paint night with one of my friends. I was super nervous about it because I'm like, oh, I can't paint, whatever. Like, but I ended up taking it super, super seriously. And at the time, like she would paint on the sides too. And so she was just like, no, like you're going to love it. And it was for her birthday. And I actually didn't paint after that for a long, long time. I didn't take up painting until maybe like 2 years later. I realized that I was battling a very deep depression because my senior year of college, I actually was sexually assaulted. And so I just kind of suffered in silence. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't report it. I didn't anything. I just tried to suppress it. And I realized I was slowly losing who I was. And I started going to therapy, and she just kind of told me like, you need to find outlets. You know, when you get triggered, you need to find something that can kind of ground you. And I didn't know what that was at the time. But I kept this painting and I had it with me, like, even after I graduated college, I just carried it around with me. I could have totally just given it away, donated it, whatever. I kept this painting. And when I moved into my apartment, I was living alone, which was even more difficult because, I mean, if you're in a deep, deep depression, it's probably not good to be alone.
Oh, no. Yeah. I had a roommate when I was living alone, and his name was Jack.
Exactly.
Tennessee honey. I remember in college when I was living alone, I don't know why I was so depressed in college, but I was drinking a lot, like uncontrollably. And I was living alone on campus, and I had some friends come visit me from off campus. And they're walking in there, and they're like, because I was the only one left living on campus. So whenever like they had a break, they'd come over. And they're like, yo, why are you having all these parties and not inviting us? And I'm like, bro, that's all me.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big turning point for me of like, I definitely got a problem here. I didn't mean to take
I need
over
to
the
straighten
conversation
myself up.
but yeah.
No, it's true though. Like when you're alone with your thoughts and you're already battling depression, I mean, not to say everybody gets to the point of being suicidal, but I think when you're alone with your thoughts, you just drag yourself down more and you're more hypercritical of yourself. And just, one day I was sitting in my apartment and I realized I had a lot of white walls. And so I was just like, you know what? I should go get canvases and I should go get paint and just figure my life out, do something, you know? And so I invited a friend over to kind of do a little paint night and stuff. And I did that with her. And I realized at that moment, like, when you paint or when I was painting, like, it was the only thing I thought about. I wasn't triggered. I wasn't overwhelmed with my thoughts. And so it just kind of became an active thing that I practiced. Like, if I felt like I was overwhelmed, or like at the time too, I was working crazy hours. I loved my job. I loved the organization I worked for, but I was working a lot of hours. And so when I would come home, I didn't have anything really to distress. And I'm not a big fan of like watching TV either. So I never had at the time even after I graduated college, I just kind of made this rule where I wouldn't have a TV in my room. And so even in my apartment, I only had a TV in the living room. And so
It makes a difference.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. You find ways to be more productive or work on yourself more, I would say.
Yeah, I just had an interview last week with Julianne, and that's what she said, like crazy boosted her creativity was she didn't own a TV anymore. And well, first, before I keep talking, I wanted to thank you for sharing that with us. I wanted you to keep going, but I didn't want it to get too much further out and not thank you for sharing that with me and with us. I'm really sorry that happened to you. But didn't you, not that I'm going to ask you to share, but since you brought it up, had you shared a poem that you wrote about that?
I did. So that's another thing. So like all in that same, I would say like time frame of my healing and expressing myself through not only painting. At the time, I kind of found out about like, it was called Take Back the Night. And so it was just for a bunch of survivors of assault that would go and either share their story and what happened to them. And I personally don't like reliving that trauma. So the way I expressed myself was writing a spoken word. And so I wrote that. And then the next year, I decided again that I would revisit that spoken word, and I rewrote another one because I was at a different point of like my healing stage. At that point, I was, painting more. I was seeing my therapist more.
Did painting help? Did painting help you get to a point where you can express that more with words?
Yeah. I mean, like, even if it was just painting sunsets, like just expressing myself creatively, not only just through painting. I love photography, so I was doing more photography, and people are like, I want you to take my picture, and I'm like, it's with my iPhone, but sure. But just like different things, like I really at that point in my life started being my authentic self. And I don't know if that's, again, maybe because I felt heard and I was able to share that in a safe space. But yeah, I wrote 2 of them. I don't mind sharing them if you'd like me to share them.
Oh, hell yeah. We didn't plan on having a poem. I know when we talk, but if you want to, please do. I don't want you to think I peer pressured you into it.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know if I want to share both. I feel like the first one is in a very dark place. I don't know. What do you think? I can share both so that way we can see the perspective, but also, yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I would love to hear one, but like I said, I brought this out of the blue. And so if you feel comfortable sharing one, I'd love to hear one. If you feel comfortable sharing both, I'd love to hear both. If you feel comfortable moving on, we can move on.
No. We're good. I'm super, super big on, well, let me read this. And then I think it kind of says a little bit in there about why I'm deciding and choosing to share, because that's also part of healing. So I titled it Surviving. And mind you, this was, again, 2 years after my assault. 2 years, a continuous loop, a rerun, ashamed and broken. I self-blame. I should have never mixed drinks. I should have never trusted strangers in my home. I could have been more aware. Unsure of what happened to me was rape, but undoubtedly unconscious. As much as I try to forget, my body remembers. I live with the double punishment of PTSD. You not only violated my body, my mind will not let me heal nor forget. I went through one of the hardest and worst situations in my life without having anyone by my side. I remember just wanting to escape. I remember the scolding hot shower I took to erase any trace of your touch. They say silence is golden. 2 years of silence, and I've come to realize I've lost myself entirely. Most days I don't cry, empty. Others, numb, I cry uncontrollably. The anxiety consumes me. I should be over it, but I'm not. It haunts me every day, night, flashbacks, triggers. It's the simple things that set me off. I'm heavily sedated so I can sleep, medicated so I can function. An untold story never heals. Surviving, you broke me, but will not end me. I'm healing a new me, unrecognizable. I've put the pieces back differently. I fell apart, but despite it all, I survived. So I reread this earlier, and I think I already had prior decided that I was going to share it if the topic came up. But what I was going to say really resonates with me is those last couple lines: an untold story never heals.
That's the line that I just took a deep breath on. I was like, geez. The whole poem, I took a deep breath. Thank you for sharing that poem.
Yeah.
There was a lot of assurance in your voice. I heard a lot of strength coming out of you with that poem.
Thanks.
What was it like when you read it for the first time at that? It was the first time you read it at that Take Back the Night event, or did you share it before then?
So, interestingly enough, at the time, before I got my apartment, so within that year after it happened, I actually moved in with my sister. She had just gotten a new house. And again, at that time, no one knew what happened to me. I mean, even the day that it happened, I think I just kind of took a super hot shower and I went back home because there was like a family function happening, and I just sat there in chaos. But yeah, I was living with my sister at the time when I wrote the second one. And I just remember being upstairs and I was writing it. But as I was writing it, tears were falling down my face just because I knew at the time I was still healing. It only had been 2 years. I knew that I was struggling with depression. I was trying to leave my sister's house. There was just, it was a lot. And I remember my brother-in-law looked up at me and he's like, "What are you doing, sister? Like, are you good?" And I think I had just finished it around that time because like I reread it and then it just, my whole demeanor changed. I was, crying a little bit, and I finally just told my sister, like, "Do you want to read this? It's a heavy topic, but I'm going to read this next week out loud at an event." And that's kind of how I discussed it. I showed it to my sister. I don't think you ever get the response that you want in the moment that you share something intimate with someone.
But I just remember my sister.
Yeah. It's an uncomfortable topic, and not just for, I think, like family, just in general, like even telling partners is like intense. And I think not everybody tells their partner, but for me, I'm very big on owning everything in every part of my life. And if somebody that comes into my life can't accept those things or accept me as a whole, then I've also just decided in my life that you're not worthy of my energy. Did
that conviction or confidence or whatever you want to call that, or your boundaries, I guess, your values, did those come with your voice? Or were they developing before your voice? Like before you wrote that poem and released it? Like it sounds like when you had the tears coming down, that was the first time you put it to the pen. And so it was just your body releasing everything you had trapped.
Yeah, I definitely think that it came from that healing process that I realized that, I would never let anyone cross those boundaries. And again, that trickled down into, like I said, like if I had a partner and I discussed with them, and even like I already knew someone was bad news. Like if I shared like, I go to therapy, and they're like, "What do you need therapy for?" I'm like, cut.
Done.
You're done.
Thank you. Anyone else want to share that sentiment?
Yeah. And so, I definitely think that there's a lot of defining moments in people's lives. And I would say that each defining moment, from me getting diagnosed, me going to camp and meeting the family that I did, having conversations with the campers that I did.
What I'm going to want to follow up on those conversations because I know there's something there. But anyways.
Even milestones, I've always kind of came up with this promise or this new boundary or this new guide to my life that, I wasn't going to allow anyone to tell me how to feel. I wasn't going to allow anyone to tell me what I should look like, what I was capable of. yeah, I would just create new boundaries as things would pop up, and slowly that helped me be comfortable with being my authentic self and finding that voice and yeah, speaking with confidence. I definitely will say that I know that I have an intense energy, but also a good energy about me.
Fierce. It's a really very great fierce.
Yeah.
Watch out energy.
People like to word vomit when they meet me. They feel very safe with me, and they'll share every intimate moment of their life with me. It's super insane. But yeah.
Wow, so you're not just a guide, you're a healer.
I guess. I don't know.
And I say that like I know what all of those terms are. I don't. It just seem right to say.
Yeah. No, I've never truly identified, I guess. I just do it because that's the light in me. And I know that that's the light in you, which is why I'm definitely our friendship migrated towards each other, and we continue to have a super cool friendship.
Yeah, absolutely. Fuck. Yeah, fuck yeah. So I wanna piggyback on what I said about the conversations that you had at camp.
Yeah.
So what were the conversations, and did you have them as a camper or as a counselor? And just for context, the cutoff age is 17. That's what the cutoff age is for someone to return as a camper. And so when there are people in your position who are able to come back as a counselor, you get some bonus years in there. But for the most part, once someone turns 17, it's their last summer. And now there's like adult camps. So that's great. But anyways, I just wanted to give the age for context.
Yeah, I actually, now that I think back at it, I definitely think that it was my first year of camp as a camper, actually, not as a counselor. And that's probably
so that shows what was on your mind when you got in there. If you brought those up, that like,
yeah,
you were just craving to have those conversations. Sorry, I keep interrupting. Go ahead.
I guess not even just craving, but just, yeah, I don't know. Camp. I wish camp was still a thing, and it still is. You can still volunteer, but I do.
Yeah,
wish
I just went to one. I just went to one near Tahoe.
But so the conversation stemmed from, I was 17 at the time. Again, I've never taken anything for face value, even though my doctor said, like, you're going to be in a wheelchair. And I had an electric wheelchair. I had all of this medical equipment. I had,
this
shower
was your life
chairs.
at 17. This was your life at 17.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
At the time, I still had all of those things. I didn't use them as much just because I'm stubborn mostly. And yeah, I was in like a lot of physical therapy at the time because I wanted to be able to walk on my own. I was using walkers, all of this stuff. I still decided that I wanted to go to college. I didn't care what it was going to take. I didn't care what issues I was going to have to like come up with. Like, I just didn't care. I knew that my life was bigger than my hometown.
Were you ever given a life expectancy day or age?
No.
Or they were just pretty clear that your life would be a lot different going forward?
Yeah, they didn't give me a life expectancy age. And also at the time, I don't think I mentioned this ever to you, but my 6th grade teacher, which is when I started getting symptoms, her mom actually had MG at the time. Yeah, the way the world conspires. I used to. She was actually my pen pal for a few years, and I wish that I would. I hope she still is alive. But I mean, even if I were to be able to see or meet with my 6th grade teacher again, I again in part will say that a lot of my voice and advocacy comes from even being her mom being my pen pal and empowering me to learn more about MG and all of that great stuff.
Hold on. For anyone listening who doesn't know what a pen pal is, because that's it means before cell phones, we had pieces of paper, and we would have, instead of writing text messages or emails, we would have a letter that we would send people back and forth. And I wanted to stress that because it sounds like that's, like you just said, that was kind of giving you a lot of your confidence and voice. And throughout those, you're writing, you're expressing yourself just through writing to her. And so you just had I don't know. I'm just trying
Yeah.
to compare that to journaling or something. Just writing
No.
something down to talk to someone, to yourself or someone. It goes such a long way.
And I think that, again, it just keeps tying into that, like, untold story never heals. Like, you have to share with someone what you're going through in order to even understand it, or maybe get through it, or just even to just get it off your chest and feel heard. But let me stop going off on tangents. I'm saying, yeah, I was never given a life expectancy. She was pretty old when I met her. So I kind of just knew like my life was going to be different. She was very vocal about like her struggles, what she was dealing with, how she managed and stuff like that. So even though I had all of those things, and even though I was in a wheelchair and I had all of these medical equipments, I still was like, I'm going to college. I'm going to do whatever it is that I want to do. I'm not going to take anything for face value. I remember having conversations at camp with campers and just telling them about like, yeah, I got into Fresno State and I'm super excited to, you know, do this. Or I don't know if I had gotten in yet, or I had applied for college. And
but college was on the horizon for you.
Yeah, I would talk a lot about my future and about what I wanted to do. And I just remember sitting at a table. I think, 8 or 10 of us fit at a table, and usually campers would try to sit with campers or whatever. And I just remember a few of the campers saying like, that's cool, but I don't think about those things because my doctor said I'm going to die by the time I'm 24. Or, I don't want to think about those things. Or they just gave me all of these different reasons, like whether it was, because of their physical disability, or, they don't have a caregiver to be with them, or they don't know where to start, or whatever it may be. But a lot of it was that because they had been given this life expectancy rate, like time, this, timestamp, expiration date, they couldn't dream. They weren't dreaming. They accepted somebody else's definition of what their life was going to be. And I just, I'm getting goosebumps. I just really couldn't take that for face value. I was like taken back. I didn't know how to respond in that moment, because I also in that moment realized, because they were all very familiar with everybody else's different disabilities and all of that stuff. Right off the bat, they can tell that I was more able. A lot of our campers were in wheelchairs. A lot of them, physically could not do a lot of things. And
did you sense that anyone felt this type of way towards you because of that?
No, I don't think any of them ever felt like, I never felt animosity.
Which would be normal. I'm just
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean,
yeah.
I don't know what goes on in people's heads, but I think that in that moment, I didn't want to respond in a way that they would feel animosity, if that made sense. I've always been very big on like having to think before I speak, because words are very, very powerful, and everyone's perspective and everybody's translation is different. And so I knew that in that moment, I needed to make sure like what I said was good, and I didn't sound like, again, I had the upper hand. And so instead, what I shared was, did you guys know that a lot of college campuses have disability programs, students with disabilities? And I shared all of these resources that were available to people like us that could help them get to that place. And not even that it had to be college, but I just, all of them, I just asked, like, what did you want to be? Like, what do you want to do, like, with your life? Or, you know what I mean? Like, do you guys have goals, aspirations? Like, what are you going to do after camp? What are you going to do after high school? So just like having those conversations with them. And I think even in that moment, they realized like, wow, I am selling myself short. And
good
so
for you for having those conversations with them. But obviously it was your life, so you had to. But I really regret not having those conversations at the time when I could have, and I just went to a camp right now, or a couple months ago, but it was a brand new camp. I had never been to. I didn't know anyone there. And it's like, no, I think you have to earn the right to ask those questions, But you confirmed what was, since I never had those conversations, what was like, and just this never ending anxiety that I've had for like several years. Like that has been haunting me for so long. I haven't told anyone this, but that's what first inspired me to write. I was like, I want to be able to write something to show what it's like. Not that I know, but like, those kids were my heroes. And I could never understand or grasp like being in high school and all your friends talking about college and what's after that. And then just you, it's like, oh, no, doctor said I'm going to die in a few years. And like, who the fuck grows up with that in their head? And so, just when I think back about all the kids and everyone I met and everyone that's passed, it's like, those dudes had way more courage than I will ever have ever in my life. And so that was just something that's always been very resonated with me in a very profound way. And I was like, I want to help tell these stories for them. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll write. And I was like, I don't know what the hell it's like to live there. So that's when I had first hit you up. I was like, I'm gonna write a book about this and interview all these people. And obviously that didn't happen, but those were all breadcrumbs that have led me on this path of where I'm on now. That led me to ghostwriting and to poetry. And now I'm here and doing the podcast. And not to take away from what you're doing or from what you're saying and to take it over. But I'm really glad you shared that, because that was just this big fear I had. Like, I hope that's not what it's like, but it is. And maybe I was just in denial of how easy my life is.
Yeah, no, I can see as a counselor, like, even, like how you said, like, oh, I might have to earn that, because you really can't be prepared for what they're going to say. And also it's just like, it's a touchy subject. So even having a conversation with someone that's more able I think that, I don't even know how to say it. Like, maybe the kids did resonate more with me because, like, yeah, I was more able, but they understood that I was fighting the same fight that they were. And so I guess maybe, I don't know. I think even those conversations were difficult for me to have. But at that moment, I just decided, like, well, now I'm going to ask every camper that comes to camp. You know what I mean?
Good for you.
Because I always moved a different way and moved like in my life. I mean, you know what I mean? And so, that was definitely changed the trajectory of my life for sure. That just one conversation, not just wanting to come back and have those conversations with kids so that way they can dream again. But even just for myself, I told myself, when I get to Fresno State, or whatever college I'm going to do, I'm not just doing it for me, but try not to get emotional, but I'm doing it for every other camper and every other patient that has muscular dystrophy that doesn't get that same opportunity. I felt that because I was able, that I had to do it not only for myself, but for all of my friends that I've met that unfortunately have passed now. And I definitely, I definitely apply that to everything in my life. Any milestone, it's not just for me, it's for all of the other people that have disabilities that feel like they can't, or
Damn, thank you for sharing that. This is a silly question, but in a lot of ways, I think it's because I spent so many years going, but like I share a lot of those same sentiments. But sometimes I judge myself. It's like, who am I to say I'm doing this for them? Like I feel like sometimes I'm like, that's so fucking self-righteous. Like, why would you say that? And so I guess I just want your opinion on like how I should feel about that.
No, I don't think that you should, like, I feel like, you get like maybe like a little bit of an imposter syndrome, like, who am I? But I think that's, again, like, those are defining moments in your life, like you going to camp and it moving you in that way that it's inspired you to be your authentic self, to create, to express yourself. That's the point of making connections with people. And that's the point of life, right? Is opening up new chapters. And so, yeah, that's.
So when I earlier this year, I was working on a chapbook manuscript, which is like a 30-page thing of poems. I actually haven't even offered to read any of mine in my own episodes yet, but this is very on topic, and I would love to share it with you if you want to hear. But I had, when I was putting together this manuscript, it really came together how much guilt I had somehow for like Jordan and for everyone, but but Jordan was like the very first very like really good friend I made. And I'm probably not even able to get through reading this. It's like a prose style because it's just titled For Jordan.
Yeah.
You want to hear it?
Yeah. Yeah, I do, because Jordan was also a very dear friend of mine. And to be honest, I'm pretty sure he was one of the people at that round table with my first conversation. It was actually both of our last possible years to be able to go.
Yeah, because that's what it is when I met him. And I was like, damn, I'm so sad I'm meeting him on his last year. And I remember one of the nights during camp, because Andrew was there as well. And I think we were talking about Get Him to the Greek, some stupid movie with Jonah Hill and Russell Brand. And there was some kind of drug in that movie called like Jeffries or something. And Andrew had brought those up and they were talking about those. And one of them had talked about like smoking weed or something. And, so I asked Jordan, I was like, have you ever? And like you said, you need to be careful what you ask, because I was not ready for the answer. And he was like, nah, it's not my thing. Plus my lungs can't take it. My heart, like my kidney, I got this. So it probably wouldn't be a very good idea for me to do that. And I was like I'm a fucking asshole.
You're just like, how did I not think that was a stupid question to answer? But again, like, you're so far removed from what's happening in the background that you're just like, oh, seemed like a simple question. But yeah, when you're
and that's
disabled,
exactly
like your answers are always going to be pretty dark.
No, and you're right. And that's it at the core, how far I am from that, from being aware of what that's like. It's not even in my stratosphere to think, hey, maybe don't ask this question. Okay, so this is like a pro style piece, and I haven't touched it since writing it. But okay, so it's called For Jordan. I met Jordan when I was 18. He was 17, and it was his last eligible year to attend a summer camp for youth with neuromuscular disorders. He had the most advanced form of muscular dystrophy of any youth there. He lived in a motor chair, and his body was in a permanent fetal position. He could barely move his fingers or head and needed help for basic human needs like using the bathroom, eating, or going to bed. None of this seemed to bother him, though. He had the biggest smile and more swag than I'll have in 10 lifetimes. He was an amazing big brother, a loving son, and truly a beautiful soul, a shining light to anyone who knew him. On December 4th, 2015, he was watching late-night TV with his little brother as he took his last breath. He was 22, and all I could think about was how fucked up it is for a child to grow up with the idea that their life will be cut short. How does a fucking kid come to terms with an early death if he can't see past Friday night, when his friends are planning the rest of their lives and he's trying to make the most of the rest of his? I didn't get to make it to his funeral. He passed away during my first month in the Peace Corps, and the only way I could pay my respects in person was if I quit in month 1 of a 27-month commitment. My heart was broken as I contemplated going home, but I made him and myself a promise that I would stay. The bigger crime would be not to live this life to the best of my ability and not enjoy everything it had to offer. So I promised Jordan that I would stay and live my life in a way that would respect him. And I think this is why I have been so ashamed of myself. I haven't kept up my end of the bargain, and I feel like I let him down more than myself. So here I am now. I've never felt more alive than when I write and share a poem. I found my fountain And this drink is to him. A brief friendship that will fill my cup until the very end. Ah, God damn it, Elisa.
You made me cry.
Jordan, I love you, dude. And Andrew, and Cameron, and Uriel, Stevie.
Yeah.
And so many others. Oh, so many others.
You saying that you feel guilt. It's crazy because I feel guilt all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Not only, yes, I'm still disabled. Yes, I have a type of muscular dystrophy, but I still always felt that guilt as I would lose another camper and another friend, you know? And I still hold that guilt of like, you know, why was I blessed enough
Survivor's
to
guilt.
be more able? Yeah. But yeah, just like you, I try to not see it as guilt anymore. I see it as being able to not only advocate for them and live for them and have the life, not maybe that they were going to have, but those experiences. I specifically, someone that is very, very dear to my heart, Miss Kiana Willer.
That's right.
Yeah. Such a diva. She always had all the accessories, the best outfit.
She was such a Barbie.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly that. Like just how Jordan was like the flyest. Like, no, if Kiana was in the room, don't even think that you're the best dressed because it was her.
For real, she was always glamorous.
I carry her in everything that I do, especially when it comes to writing and expressing myself. Actually, after I lost her, the conversations that we would have, like when I would go visit her and all this stuff, even at camp, she would always say like, I'm going to start a blog one day, a fashion blog, or I'm going to do this, you know what I mean? But I was always tied to fashion. She's like, she would take pictures of her shoes, you know what I mean? Like she would even do her own.
And damn, that's where Elisa's end was cut off. Like I said before, I considered not uploading this episode because it wasn't complete, but after listening to it again, there are just so many things we talk about that we hope can be helpful to people that are living with a disability or are grieving or dealing with any form of survivor's guilt. My takeaway from this conversation with Elisa is that there are people all around us who are fighting and clawing just to wake up and breathe and get out of bed. People who are disabled and live with tremendous physical and emotional pain every moment of every day, and just because their diagnosis isn't visible to the public doesn't make them any less of a hero or someone with a tremendous amount of courage. I also learned that there's no right or wrong way to grieve someone, especially if they lived in a way that you would never be able to comprehend. We have things like empathy and compassion to lean on for a reason, and it's perfectly okay if you wish to live your life in a way to honor someone that made a lasting impact on you. And it's also perfectly okay if there are days when you aren't your best, because that's what it means to be alive and to be a human too. Keeping those who have died in our hearts is a way to honor them, regardless of how little or how well you knew them or their personal battles. Life is really fucking hard, but we're all in this together. Thank you so much for listening. I love and see every single one of you. If you have any thoughts or want to continue the conversation, please do not hesitate to reach out.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Art to Heart podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating or review. You can tag me on social media, send me a DM, or even leave me a voicemail at www.art2heart.life. Let me know how you're liking these conversations. If you have feedback, tips, constructive criticism, I'm all ears. This is a labor of love, and I'm still figuring my way out around this medium. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.